Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to When We Walk. This is a little podcast where we discuss the questions we all ask as we walk through life. I'm Micah.
I'm Shireen.
Let's chat.
So it's my favorite season of all time.
Me too.
It is for both of us. Mm-hmm. I thought you said you've grown to like the fall.
I like the fall a lot.
But you still love summer better.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the fall a lot. I'm learning to appreciate winter.
Oh, good for you.
Spring, unfortunately, is dropping in the polls.
Spring in Nebraska
the Midwest,
is rough.
It's brutal.
Yeah.
But summer still tops the list.
Summer always wins, forever and always. In my heart, in your heart, we are summer people. Mm-hmm. We love the pool. We love sweating.
Yep.
We don't mind it. I think because we grew up in the South.
Doesn't bother
That's
me.
just what you do. You have no choice. But we also love air conditioning. That's important.
Yeah, it's true.
But we also love the beach.
Mm-hmm.
We've always loved the beach, both of us. This
we
worked out well
days.
for us
Yeah.
in marriage that we both love summer.
Yeah, it's true.
We love long days. Yes, late nights.
And you really get long days here.
I know. We've been eating dinner at like 8 o'clock some nights.
Works out
because
nice.
we're just out and enjoying the outdoors till late.
It's so great.
It's so
and
wonderful.
it's not nasty hot yet. Blake, who's sitting right back there, has always said June is the best month in Nebraska.
Ooh, okay.
And we have been gone in June.
We've always
for 3
gone to the
straight
beach in
years,
June.
and we're
Yeah.
here in June this year. And I'm realizing it's pretty amazing.
It's pretty great. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're taking sabbatical later, so we are enjoying June.
Mm-hmm.
You get cool
great.
mornings, warm afternoons, cool evenings. It's really great.
It's pretty solid.
But because we love summer, we love the beach
Yep.
very much. And we, do you remember, I don't remember, it was one of our sabbaticals, I think, right? A
What are
beach
you gonna
trip
ask me?
about when we prayed for
Oh, yeah.
you. You took the kids because I think I had to stay home with a baby, or in the little house we were renting. Mm-hmm. You took the older two to go crabbing.
Yep.
And
That was our
for those
first
of
sabbatical.
you, our first one. So the
2012.
older two were like little.
Right.
For those of you who don't know, crabbing is what you do when you go late at night when it's dark with a flashlight, because all the crabs, and they're just sand crabs. We're not talking like
Tiny.
we're going hunting for like crab legs or anything.
They're tiny little crabs.
Tiny little
white
crabs. They're
crabs.
almost like translucent even. And they're like soft, and you can just pick them up and
Well, you net them.
yeah, you get them in a net, you throw them in your little bucket,
Kids love
see
it.
how many you
You're
can
chasing
get.
them around the beach.
Yes, and
yeah.
they're so fast, and it's fun to just catch them. So they come out at night.
Yep.
And so you were going to take the kids to go crabbing.
Yep.
And before we went, actually, I think I was with y'all too. I think my parents were there because I remember doing this.
Okay.
As we were walking out, you said, let's stop and pray for God to give us a big crab.
Biggest crab. Mm-hmm.
Which is actually really hard to find.
Yeah.
Because these crabs are they're like not even as big as the palm of your hand, smaller than that.
Yeah.
And so we prayed it, quick little prayer with the kids, and we went out there.
Biggest one I've ever caught.
Biggest one we've ever
Great.
seen.
Filled up the bottom of the bucket.
Yes.
We took a picture of it. I still have the picture. As
Yes.
this little reminder that God answers prayer.
That God answers prayers.
And it was a cool little lesson for the kids.
It was. It was neat because they remember it. Mm-hmm. They remember praying that prayer, and they remember getting the crab.
Yeah,
and
it's
we
pretty
still
great.
have, and the fact that we documented it is now a great story to go back to. Remember when God did this.
Yeah.
Which is
That was
what
fun.
we're talking about as a church. We're talking about miracles.
Yeah, we are.
And although, would you consider that a miracle?
Yeah, I don't know.
That's an answered prayer.
It is. It seemed to be an answered prayer.
But
yeah,
according to the way you calculate miracles,
it would be.
It would be.
It would fit in the
It
category.
fits the calculation.
Which low probability. I'd never seen a crab that big in all my years of crabbing. And that was just a normal family thing we did growing up. So I've done a lot of it. 2, special circumstances, we prayed right before we went.
We prayed.
And I usually don't pray before I go crabbing.
No.
So it was, I think it was God's little gift to us.
I do too. To help our kids see how big he is, the things that he cares about, little things. And just to remember when God answered.
Yeah. Which is really
grows
cool
your faith.
it's cool to help kids grasp that just the simple cause and effect of prayer, and God hears and God answers. As we grow into adults, the question becomes, so if God didn't provide the biggest crab you had ever seen, what do you do with that? Is he not real?
Right.
Does he not care? Does he not answer prayer? And I think that kind of brings us to what we want to talk about today is our faith when it comes to God doing the miraculous.
Right.
I think sometimes we can have the perspective, there's kind of the all or nothing, like God always does or God never does. God will, anything you ask for, God will give it to you. And if he doesn't, it's because you don't have enough faith. Or no, God just doesn't do those things anymore. And that sometimes that perspective doesn't just exist outside the church, even within the church. You encounter people.
There's a lot of people.
And I think what it has more to do with, I don't think it's like we have to live in either of those extremes. I think as followers of Jesus, we will experience all of them at different points in time in our journey with Jesus, and to simply be honest about them when they're there.
That's good.
So the seasons of high faith we're going to have, and the seasons where it feels like we kind of have low faith we're going to have.
Yeah.
Like they're probably going to come at some point.
Yeah.
Both of those will. And I think in both seasons it's important to lean into those moments, because there's things you can learn about God in both of those seasons.
I think you're right. I do think as we get older and you experience more life and you see how hard life is, and you have seen things that you ask God for not come to pass, you get discouraged. And whether it's, you get discouraged, I just don't have the energy or mental and emotional capacity to pray for the thing anymore. I still believe in God. I still believe, he's in control. He can do things, whatever. I just don't have the capacity to engage in that, because I know I've felt that at times. Or I think the other extreme is you just walk away. You can walk away and just say, he doesn't do that. He didn't do that in the way I wanted, in the way I asked. Therefore, he's not real, or he doesn't care. And I think I think it's funny. I was actually just reading in the Bible this morning, some of my Bible reading was in the Psalms, and there's a Psalm where David says, God, are you asleep? Wake up. He literally is like, where are you? Wake up. Do you see what's happening with me? And I think, oh my gosh, that is how it feels, especially when it's, I'm asking you for this. Don't you see? Don't you care? Shouldn't you care in the way that I care? And if you don't, does that mean I'm done with you? That is hard. It's human. It's reality. David dealt with it. Tons of people in Scripture dealt with it, and we still deal with it today.
I mentioned this in my sermon recently, but a sociologist named Christopher Smith discovered that the number one reason for doubt in God isn't science. It's not cultural baggage around the church. It's
like debating topics or apologetics.
It's not Bible issues, of how do you believe in a God that would allow war, those kind of things. It is unanswered prayer. People who expected God to show up in a particular situation and he didn't, and so they assume he is either not real or that he doesn't care.
I think we've seen that played out in our many years of doing ministry and counseling people and walking through hard things with people. We've seen people walk away, or huge questions and huge doubts, which, like you said, I think you said it before, which isn't wrong. Like that is part of the journey that we are okay, that God is okay with us kind of testing him in those areas and coming to him. Obviously, David went to God with his wake up, God, so he can handle that. It's the harder part of when it isn't answered in the way we want it to be. And we just want to now be it. And really what happens is we've made God in our image, and we wanted him to do the thing we wanted him to do in the way we wanted it. And that is not how he works.
That's true. Remember this old line from Graham Cook where he said, God is completely predictable in who he is.
But
completely unpredictable in what he will do.
Yes.
And that's the tension that we live in as followers of Jesus, is God's character
doesn't change,
always the same. But how he's going to respond in a given situation really is, to some degree, it's a mystery. It's beyond our understanding. We can't create a formula around it. We can't say, well, if you pray this way and do this thing and say this chant, then he'll respond this way.
Which people like to do.
They do. Yeah.
We've done that in the past.
Yeah. Yep. And so it really is. And I think God is so committed to our growth and maturity as followers of Jesus that he won't always show up in the way that we feel like our formulas are going to produce him.
Right.
So that he can show us a different aspect to his character or his nature. He can help us learn something else along the way. And
not just learn about him, but about ourselves. Because ultimately it's about our personal growth and connection to him. But we turn it and make it about who he is, which is the wrong way to look at it.
Yeah. So currently for me right now, I'm in this like really sweet season where I feel like faith is rising for miracles. I think I think early on I was like, man, like I'll believe it. It was easy to believe. And then as I grew older, it wasn't like crisis type situations where God didn't answer a prayer or whatever.
Right.
I think some of it is like, you learn some things along the way. You kind of learn how to solve some problems. You have more resources than you used to have.
Yep.
And you slowly become less. Yeah, and you become a little bit less dependent upon God. If you don't show up, I'm sunk. Kind of a situation. And so you can just kind of drift from a miracles mindset and into just a little bit more of a rational, like, I got it, and God's with me. Everything's going to be okay. And lately, he's kind of been awakening in me this, like, no, I want to do the miraculous. I want to do the miraculous at your church, for specifically salvation, healing, deliverance. We've been talking about that.
Yeah, we have.
And really feel like from the Lord that he encouraged us in that way to say, I want to do these things that you see the disciples do in Mark chapter 6. But also in our personal lives, I feel like there have been, even since I've kind of had this awakening, I've recognized there's a handful of things in our lives that are challenges that I have just been kind of not really lifting up to the Lord, just kind of trying to figure it out on my own, or kind of just this general, like, God, would you just be in this? Would you just kind of guide us? Would you just lead us rather than
show
specifically
us what to do
asking whether it's something for our kids or something in our home life or our marriage life, to be able to say, no, God, I'm specifically asking you to do fill in the blank. There's risk involved with that.
For sure.
And sometimes I think I've gotten more comfortable at times just being like, Lord, just be in the situation, just bless the situation, just speak, just guide,
that feels
just
like
lead.
A safe prayer.
Yeah, it's a good general, just kind of throw it out there rather than a specific.
Yeah. It doesn't take a lot of faith to pray those prayers.
It doesn't.
But it still feels like I'm still inviting God. I'm open to what he wants to do, but I'm not actually stepping out in in faith, trusting him for something big or taking a risk. We don't like to take risks.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm the same. I don't know that I'm in the same boat you are right now. I think I go in waves of, I know he can. We've seen him do it. We've experienced miracles ourselves, personal, individual, as a family. We've seen him move mountains figuratively in our lives. And so I don't think I'm like shying away from it. I think it's just that, like, I think I've just I've not practiced that that muscle very well. I haven't worked that faith muscle in that way in a while. So it feels like a bigger risk to work it. It feels scarier.
Yeah. And so I think what I can mostly relate with is people who, it's not that you're like anti-miracle, though I can understand the anti-miracle people too, but it's not that you're anti-miracle. You're just not conscious of the possibility of a miracle. You're not thinking about it actively. You're not praying in a very specific way. And I think that's important to do. I think,
for sure.
I mean, you look at invitation after invitation that Jesus gives us in the Gospels of, to me, one of the hardest things he said ask anything in my name and it will be done to you.
I know
done
that
for you. Like,
passage is so
oh my
hard.
gosh. Yeah. And we have tried to let's unpack, what does it mean to be in his name? And what was the context of him saying that? What did he really mean? And I think the reality, he said it in so many different times in so many different contexts. I don't know that we're supposed to like figure it out. I think it's just, we're supposed to do it and trust him with the outcome. And I don't know that I always do at times. I think I keep it kind of general. So anyway, I'm feeling this leading towards get more specific and get more bold. Mark Batterson says, bold prayers honor God. And what he means by that is when we are really specific and pray big prayers, that when God shows up, it's undeniable. They honor God. Like it's undeniable. Like he came through. You didn't just kind of Christianize this experience, but you actually, like, there's evidence that God actually showed up in this situation.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think as we're talking, one of the things that I feel like where I am and maybe not praying those big, bold prayers or asking in big faith is because I think I'm in this season of, yeah, but he's called us to suffer. Yeah, but I don't understand suffering.
Good.
I need to understand the suffering of Christ. And so that means I need to just endure, which is true. It is very true. That is something that is very biblical. We see it. People have had to endure. They've had to suffer. Suffering. We all have to carry our own cross. We should bear one another's burdens. Like, suffering is a part of life. And so I think it's this tension of, is this God calling me to endure and understand the suffering of Christ, of the cross? Or is this, no, I'm going to pray? Or can I hold both? And I know in my head I can hold both. But I think for a lot of believers that feels in tension. And like opposed.
It does. So here's a thought on that. It's not my thought. It's a book I'm reading right now. J.P. Moreland, A Simple Guide to Experience Miracles.
Yes.
And he talks about, in his chapter on healing, 14 reasons why people don't get healed. And this is a philosopher, a Christian philosopher. So he is very logical in the way
that feels almost too logical for me.
14 reasons why people don't get healed, but I think they're great. And I related.
Just that right there will probably make people go, this guy, I don't want to read this book.
Right. But it's all of the possible factors that might limit the healing power of God.
Okay.
And he hits really pretty much everything.
Is that one I just said one of them?
Yes. It is a misplaced emphasis on the role of suffering in the life of a believer is one of the things he talks about. And I thought this was really interesting.
Explain misplaced.
So,
because I had different thoughts about
we
that.
know that suffering is a huge part of life on planet Earth that God redeems for his purposes as he comes into our life. Like that is very clear in the Gospels.
Yes.
His thing, again, this is the chapter on healing. Why don't people get healed? We overemphasize the role that physical sickness plays in suffering.
Okay.
Because biblically, most cases where a sick person is prayed for, they are healed. Now you could say, well, they...
I mean, there is a passage in Scripture that Jesus healed all who came to him who were sick.
Right.
And
that
and
I put this in the category of ask anything in my name, it'll be done for you. It's like, I don't get that. But what the Bible reveals to us is a God who loves to heal.
Right.
And so suffering, yes, but suffering via sickness is not necessarily dots that are connected as closely in the Bible as we connect them in our theology of suffering. This is his thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure.
Yeah.
I mean, there's Job.
There's
I know
Job.
a lot of people don't know what to do with Job.
Yeah.
Job is an anomaly sometimes.
There's Job. There's, but
Paul
eventually,
talks about his thorn.
But Job is healed.
Well, yes. That is true.
And Paul in the thorn. Yeah, that's another tough one.
Yeah.
But that was, apparently he was sent by the enemy. We don't exactly know what the thorn is. So this guy is not saying that God never uses suffering. He's not saying that at all.
Right.
He's saying a misplaced emphasis on suffering in the life of a believer.
I could see that part. I think because we live in a world, though, that doesn't want suffering, or culture, maybe our Western culture. So that is why, to me, the tension of, do you pray for the miracle and what feels like an ask to get out of the situation, or do you suffer and endure because that is what God has called us to? And I think there actually is a place for both. I think you learn through the suffering, but then I think you keep praying in faith for the miracle.
Right.
But this is where I think the connection point is I think it has to be done in community, because suffering is hard and you need people. And also keeping your faith muscle strong to take the risk of praying that bold prayer, I think you need community for.
Yeah, because you're putting your heart out there.
Yeah.
You're putting your hope and expectation out there every time you pray a bold prayer.
So,
and that's vulnerable.
Not total, but we experienced this when I was having headaches for that season when we were newly married, engaged. Can't remember.
Engaged.
Both.
And then
they lasted for like a year. Yeah. I had just come back from Africa, and I had never had like migraine headaches like this ever. And I had already gone through a lot of spiritual warfare stuff and had some things prayed off of me. But I was still consistently getting these headaches, probably like daily, that were debilitating, like crippling. And then to the point where you were like miserable because I was miserable. But we didn't share it with our community for the longest time.
Endured together.
And I don't know, looking back, I'm like, that was dumb. We had really close friends in that season who we lived near, who we did life with, we were in ministry with. Yeah. And I think I remember that morning before, it was like our 7:30 prayer. We did like a 7:30 staff prayer at our campus ministry that we worked at. And you said, we need to ask people to pray. And I kind of did not want to. It felt very vulnerable. I think there was that fear of me, what if it doesn't work? What if it doesn't work? And I was wrestling with that because I had already walked through so many other hard spiritual and emotional and physical things. And we told our staff and our friends, and I just remember them surrounding me, and I remember you weeping, which rarely happens, and you like broke down because we had been carrying it. What?
I weep in other settings, just not those.
Just not those.
Yeah.
But all our friends surrounded us, and I remember it was so powerful. And then I did not have a headache from that point forward.
I know. It's crazy.
It was a miracle, and I'm convinced it was because we finally included some people. Because didn't have the faith. It was so heavy that we couldn't carry it alone in that season. And I think there are some things that God wants to do in community. He wants to grow not just our own personal faith muscles. He will use the suffering, but then he also wants to use the miracle to grow other people's faith muscles. And so I think we have to do both in community. Yeah.
And the other point that story brings up is that when God doesn't seem to respond the way we expect him or want him to respond in a given prayer, it's because I'm convinced not in every case, because there could be other factors, but in most cases, it's because God has something else he's doing.
Yeah, that's true.
That is related adjacently to what it is you're praying for. And so for us, what was related in that moment was God knew in his wisdom as a kind and loving father, I don't want to just heal Shireen. I want to teach them about community and the power of prayer and community in the midst of this suffering they're going through, this struggle they're going through.
And that kind of anchored that truth for us and why we believe in community so much.
Yeah, so that year of praying for God to heal, it's not that God didn't hear, it's not that there was like sin involved, it's not that like we weren't praying the right formula of prayer. It's that in that case, I believe, looking back now, God had something else related to the healing that he was wanting to get into our hearts. And I think that's usually the case when we're going to God with big, bold prayers. When he doesn't respond, we can, again, God is always consistent in who he is, but he's unpredictable in how he's going to go about things. You have something good that you're doing in me, even though I can't feel it right now. Like, I'm giving you the situation, you're not responding the way I expect you to respond.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe you're teaching me about persistence in prayer and increasing my dependency on you. Maybe you're increasing my faith. Maybe you're going to teach me about community. Maybe you are going to teach me about how to endure and become more resilient in the midst of disappointment. But there's always something good he's doing.
That's true.
As he works out whatever he's working out in response to your prayer.
Yeah. I think one of the things we have to remember when we're kind of going after these miracles or praying these bold, faith-filled prayers, these risky prayers, we can say, is we have to remember that if we aren't praying these while we are trying to connect with him intimately, we won't know his nature, and we will get so consumed with what he's going to do. Like, it's that whole concept of we have to know his nature and who he is, so that if something doesn't turn out the way we want it to, we can still go back to, but I know God is this. Yep. And I think about that is literally how David prays, whatever, writes his poetry.
Totally.
You see him, wake up, God, where are you? But then he anchors in, but I know you are loving and faithful, and you do love justice, and you will take care of me. Like, he almost always anchors in the truth of who God is. And you see that nod back to God's nature in Exodus 34, that he always brings in those character pieces of who God is, regardless of his situation. And I think for us personally, we have to keep going after those things, knowing who God is. We have to grow our personal relationship, our intimacy with God, so that we can, when we pray and ask for those big, risky, bold, faith-filled prayers, no matter what happens, we go back and anchor in the truth of who he is.
Yep.
I think that's important.
That's what it's all about. Because the faith in the miracles is not in the miracle itself. It's in the God who can perform it.
And we get that. I think that's where we get that warped. And I think that's why so many people are afraid of miracles, or afraid of asking the bold prayers.
Yeah.
Because we don't know God, really, when it comes down to it.
Yep. So maybe a good place to land this is for our listeners. What is it you would love to see God do in your life that you haven't yet specifically asked him to do?
And are you willing to take the risk?
What bold prayers are you holding on to that you're not yet, you haven't been willing to, or you feel like it's silly, or you're just not yet lifting up to God? Give it a shot.
And invite people into it, I would say.
Yeah.
I think working out those faith muscles with friends is way better. You can carry the weight of everything differently when you do it in community.
Yep. I am more convinced than ever that God is a miracle working God. And I can say that now at 45 from a place of depth that I couldn't say at 25.
Which is funny because we saw a lot more, it felt like, when we were younger.
And we've experienced more disappointment over the last 20 years. And yet I'm more convinced than ever that he wants to do it, and that he's available and wants to work in profound ways in our lives that are undeniable.
It's good.
But he has to be let in.
Yep.
And he's going to wait, I think, in many ways for us to ask him, so that he can respond in a way that really helps us see that it was him.
That's good.
Okay. All right. So y'all go for it. Pray big prayers, pray bold prayers, and see what God does. Thanks so much for joining us. We will be with you next time.